It was just another lazy afternoon on the edge of town, the kind of quiet day where nothing much ever happens. A few people passed by, minding their own business, and the sun beat down on the old highway where a group of bikers had stopped for a break. Loud laughter, revving engines, and the smell of gasoline filled the air. But then, something happened that made a nearby couple freeze in disbelief. One of the bikers, a tall, rough-looking man with a sharp sneer, walked over to a small stray dog that had wandered too close. Without warning, he kicked the dog hard enough to send it yelping into the street. People turned. Some stared. No one quite knew how to react. Maybe they were too shocked, or maybe too scared of the man in leather and chains. But what the biker didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had seen everything. Someone they would never expect. A man sitting quietly just a few feet away, wearing sunglasses and a cap pulled low over his face. That little dog wasn't just a stray. The man who'd been watching slowly stood up. He walked toward the group, not with anger, but with a calm, steady presence that made the air feel different. The laughter stopped. The biker turned, confused, unaware of what was coming. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because the person now standing in front of him, was no ordinary bystander. The man took off his sunglasses slowly, revealing a familiar face, calm, serious, and instantly recognizable to anyone who had ever watched a movie or read a headline. It was Keanu Reeves. But in that moment, he wasn't a celebrity. He was just a quiet man who had just seen someone hurt a dog he deeply cared about. The biker narrowed his eyes, confused at first, then slightly amused. "What? You got a problem," he muttered, trying to play it off. The rest of the group stood behind him, their laughter awkward now, unsure of how to react to the sudden shift in mood. Keanu didn't say a word. He knelt beside the dog, gently checking it over. The way he moved, careful, patient, wasn't just concern. It was something deeper. This wasn't just a pet. It was family. The people nearby started whispering, realizing who he was. Phones stayed in pockets, as if everyone sensed this wasn't a moment for attention, it was something more serious. The biker stepped back a little, suddenly unsure of himself. Keanu finally looked up at him. His voice was quiet. "That dog didn't do anything to you," he said. Just 7 words, but they hit harder than any threat. What the biker didn't know was that this dog had a story. One tied to a painful chapter in Keanu's life. One that made this moment far more personal than anyone could guess. And what would happen next, would leave everyone stunned. The tension between them hung in the air like a storm that hadn't broken yet. The biker tried to hold his ground, but something in Keanu's steady gaze made even his crew shift uncomfortably. This wasn't a scene they were used to, a man standing calmly, without shouting or threats, yet somehow holding all the power. Still, the biker scoffed and looked around for backup, trying to brush off the moment. But his voice wavered. "Didn't know it was your dog," he muttered, as if that made it better. Keanu stayed silent for a beat. Then he said, "Does it matter whose it is?" That question cut deeper than any insult. A few people nodded quietly from a distance. A woman nearby whispered to her son, "That's the guy who rescued 2 shelter dogs last year. I read about it." The truth was, this dog had come into Keanu's life not long after he'd lost someone close. It was more than a pet, it had been his reason to get up in the morning when nothing else made sense. The animal had been through its own trauma, rescued from a bad situation. They had healed together, piece by piece. Meanwhile, one of the younger bikers in the group looked uneasy. He stepped forward, his eyes flicking between the older man and Keanu. "Maybe we should just go," he said quietly, but his voice was ignored. What no one realized yet was that this confrontation wasn't just about a dog. It was about who we become when no one's watching, and what happens when someone finally does. The air grew heavy with silence. The kind that makes people hold their breath without even realizing it. The older biker, still trying to act unbothered, stared back at Keanu with a forced smirk. But that confidence was starting to slip. His friends looked away. The crowd had grown. No one said anything, but eyes were locked on the scene, on the dog still trembling at Keanu's feet, and the man who had just proven he had no idea who he was dealing with. The younger biker who had spoken earlier stepped back again, clearly uncomfortable. He had seen his leader throw his weight around before, but this time was different. There was no shouting match, no chest pounding or chaos. Just one man and a moment of truth pressing down on everyone. Keanu stood slowly, brushing dirt off his hands. "You think being tough means hurting something weaker than you?" he asked, still calm, but firmer now. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. The words carried. A woman nearby wiped away a tear. A man muttered, "He's right," under his breath. But the biker's pride was a fragile thing, and now it was cornered. He took a step closer, fists clenching, trying to salvage control of the moment. His jaw tightened, eyes locked with Keanu's. "You don't scare me," he said low. But it wasn't about fear. Not for Keanu. Not for the dog. And not for the people watching, who were about to witness a moment none of them would forget. Before Keanu could respond, a voice broke through the crowd, steady, familiar, and unexpected. "That's enough," it said. Heads turned. From the edge of the gathering stepped a man in a worn sheriff's jacket, badge still clipped to his chest. It was Deputy Ramos, a local officer known more for handling quiet traffic stops than crowd control. But today, his expression was serious. He didn't approach Keanu first. Instead, he walked straight up to the biker. "You again?" he asked, voice sharp. "Didn't we talk last time about keeping trouble off these roads?" The biker looked stunned, like he hadn't expected anyone to actually hold him accountable. "You know him?" someone whispered. The deputy nodded slightly. "We've had complaints," he said, loud enough for all to hear. The biker started to protest, but the deputy raised a hand. "Not now," he said firmly. Then he turned to Keanu and the dog. "Is he all right?" Keanu nodded, his hand still resting gently on the dog's back. "Shaken," he said quietly, "but he'll be okay." Then came the twist, one that no one had seen coming. Deputy Ramos glanced down at the dog and froze. "Wait," he said. "Is that?" His voice trailed off, then he looked up. That dog was reported missing 3 months ago. From a stolen rescue van. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Keanu's face tightened. "What?" he asked. "I adopted him from a shelter in Oregon." And just like that, what started as a cruel moment turned into something far more complicated, raising questions no one was ready for. Keanu looked straight at Deputy Ramos, his brow furrowed. "I had no idea," he said, voice calm but serious. "The shelter told me he was abandoned, they said he had no microchip." The deputy nodded slowly, pulling out a small scanner from his truck. The biker shifted uncomfortably, suddenly paying close attention as the device beeped near the dog's shoulder. A pause. Then another beep. Everyone waited. Deputy Ramos checked the screen, then looked up. "His name's Charlie. He was stolen 3 months ago from a rescue transport van just outside Sacramento. We've been looking ever since." Keanu's hand tightened slightly around the dog's collar. "So how did he end up at that shelter?" he asked. The deputy looked at the biker, then slowly turned to the younger man who had spoken earlier, the one who had urged the group to leave. The kid's face went pale. "You know anything about that van, Mason?" the deputy asked. The crowd fell dead silent. Mason glanced down, then back at his group. "I didn't take it," he muttered. "But I knew it was bad. I told them to leave the cages. I didn't think they'd actually sell the dogs." Keanu stared at him, stunned. You sold rescue animals? The older biker stepped forward now, defensively. We didn't steal no van. We just found them. Made a few calls. Thought we could get something for them. Deputy Ramos shook his head slowly. Well, that changes everything. But just as the crowd thought it was over, Charlie suddenly barked, once, sharply, and turned his head toward a parked car. A woman stepped out, holding an old photo in her hand. Her eyes welled with tears. That's him, she whispered. That's my Charlie. I've been looking for him for months. Keanu looked at the dog, then back at her. And for the first time that day, his voice cracked. Looks like he was never mine to begin with. Keanu knelt beside Charlie one last time, gently rubbing his ears. The dog looked between him and the woman, tail wagging slowly, like he was starting to remember. She stepped forward, crouched down, and pulled out a small, worn collar from her pocket. It had a faded tag with the name, Charlie, engraved on it. The moment she held it up, the dog's tail went wild. He leapt into her arms with a soft whine, burying his face in her coat. The crowd watched in silence, touched by the reunion. Keanu stood up slowly, emotion in his eyes but no bitterness. He was never just a pet, he said softly. He was a reminder that healing is possible, even if it's only for a while. Deputy Ramos walked over, speaking just loud enough for those close by to hear. We'll sort out the transport records and follow up with that shelter. If they accepted a stolen dog, someone's got explaining to do. He turned toward the bikers, especially the older one. And as for you, we've got some questions you're going to answer. The group didn't resist. The bravado was gone. As things settled down, people began to leave, still whispering about what they'd witnessed. A cruel act had brought out more than just anger, it had uncovered a hidden crime, reunited a lost dog with its real owner, and reminded everyone that compassion doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Before getting into his car, Keanu looked back once, watching Charlie and his owner walking away. He smiled faintly. Because sometimes, even in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, something unexpected happens that restores your faith in people, and reminds you that doing the right thing always matters, even when no one's watching.